Hello, this is Wyland with the FPV podcast. Going into episode 3, so we're covering Atlanta Aftermath. So this is level 2 of DRL. Again, just like last time, this is off the cuff, unedited, my quick thoughts on the episode. So we are in the semifinals, so that means there's 12 pilots and they're going to be cutting down to 6 for the finals. They are at the Atlanta Guardian Center. So this is a place for first responders and military. So it's a training facility for our elite. It's a very interesting facility. I wish we had a chance to actually fly in there for F3 Expo, but it looks like we won't have that chance, but we can certainly watch DRL and enjoy that facility. So just like last time, let's go ahead and cover some pilot information. I think the biggest story that we have so far going into DRL is Jet and his struggle so far. I mean, he is the reigning champion. He's got that crown on his head, and you can tell that it's really getting to him. He just hasn't been performing as well as last year, which put him on the top. We see this all the time in team sports and also in individual sports where the person with the crown on his head, he just has so much pressure that the second year around trying to do it again, trying to repeat, it just doesn't work out, and it really does feel like it's affecting Jet this year. The next big story I would say is how good Gab and the Noob is. They are just really at a different level. Probably at a distant third is Wild Willie. I mean, he's just performing really well, but he's crashed out more often than, the other two, and that's really affected his standings in my point of view. But all three of those pilots have just been amazing. They're just at a different level, best of the best type of stuff. Just watching them race against each other is just so interesting, and each of them has their different strengths. Gab has probably the most amazing reflexes right off the line. His whole shots off the line, and any type of racing sport in which you're from a dead stop to a go, that first beep and then going with that whole shot is so important, because that gets you out to that lead, that gets you the clean open path to where you can pick your own lines because there's nobody else in front of you or next to you. That's always so important. Gab's just so good at it. It's just amazing to see him get those distances. The only thing with him is that he really needs to, keep his foot on the gas. I think he gets a little conservative a little bit too often, and that can catch up to him, and then he gets stuck in the pack, which I don't know. It just doesn't seem like he's really good at. Willie's one of those guys where when he flies, he's just unpredictable, but he's so good at it that he can usually recover from any mistakes, and he's never out of the race. He can go from the middle of the pack to first so easily. He's just one of the wild card pilots, as I said. A-Nub, on the other hand, he's just crushing it on the technical stuff, and he's just doing really well. By far, probably right now, the most well-rounded pilot of the three. He's just doing so much to prove that he deserves to be first. And, based on his highlights, that he really wants that championship. He wants to be number one. So it's really important to him. DRL did a great background story on him during the episode. It just showed how much passion he has for the sport, how much he enjoys building, how much he enjoys designing. All the things that go into drone racing, he enjoys, and that's why he's so good, is that he just doesn't enjoy flying. He enjoys almost every aspect of what makes, a quad be able to go fast, and he shows it, and it's pretty amazing. Now, one of the things that's very interesting, it didn't highlight the fact that A-Nub and Jet, they fly together all the time. Pretty sure that everybody knows this. It's just, it's just one of the things that I would assume that they would actually talk about when they're doing any type of background on either Jet or A-Nub, but it just didn't seem to come up. The other spotlight was on Jaws. He was the winner of the DRL video game tryouts. So he's definitely one of the luckiest persons because he's already got a $75K contract. So definitely the luckiest rookie of them all out there right now. But one of the things that I would like to say is that I've personally met him. He's actually come to one of my races, and I can tell you for a fact that every race matters to him. It doesn't matter if it's practice, qualifying, or finals. When he doesn't perform well, even in one heat, I mean, he puts a lot of pressure on himself. He wants to be the best every single time. And just like Jet and A-Noob, Jaws and Nurk, they actually live in the same region, so they fly together, so they compete against each other and they push each other. Pretty sure they're both a part of the Indy 5 group. So again, another thing that wasn't highlighted in DRL that they could have actually made I guess, a link between the two. You have Jet and Anub, and then you have Jaws and Nurk both pushing themselves, both together, trying to be the best of the best. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the track. This track I definitely like more than the first track just because it was easier to follow. Because we are at an indoor facility with less vertical height, it was just easy to follow what's going on and, who's first, who's second, who's third. And the only odd thing is that they decided to explain the track layout after the second heat. So going into the third heat, they did a really good job of explaining the layout. Not sure why they did that. I kind of wonder if they did a study saying that you want to show a few races and then explain the layout, and the audience will actually get it more. But I just found it odd that we went straight into the racing, in which you really didn't know the layout all that well, and then they took the time to explain the layout, and they did it really well. Kind of wish they showed a little bit more FPV view, but overall it was really nicely laid out. There was a lot of open, sweepy sections, fast sections, and then it was followed up by technical sessions. The only thing I would say is that the last section, the last room, it didn't really feel all that exciting. It didn't really feel like it made, an impact on the race. Once they got through the last technical session, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it just felt like, you knew who was going to win, and it just went that way. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the racing that went on. So Group 1, we had Gab, Anub, Jet, Nurk, Flying Bear, and Beast Mode. One thing I would say is I know Beast Mode. I've talked to him. We've interviewed him on the FPV podcast, and I do feel bad for him right now. He's a really great guy. He's a really good pilot, but he's really struggling right now. I think he's the type of pilot that really enjoys a lot of practice. He really wants to get a lot of practice on the track, and that's when he performs the best. And it just doesn't feel like the DRL format's really doing him any justice in terms of him competing at his highest level. But unfortunately, this is the format that you have to this is the format that he has to deal with, and he has to perform at that level in order to, continue on. And right now, he's just not doing it. Flying Bear, I don't really know much about him. You can tell that he belongs, though. I mean, he definitely has the skills. It just wasn't his day when it comes to flying. Definitely a person that I would like to get onto the FPV podcast just so that I would know the pilot better. But yeah, that's all I really got to say. It just wasn't his day. Now, if you've been listening to the FPV podcast, you would know Nurk because he's been on quite a few times. He's an interesting one. He's the one that's a little confusing right now because I know for a fact that Nurk can hang with every one of these pilots. In fact, earlier this year, he was at a multi-GP event in which almost all of the best pilots in the US was in that event, and he won that event. And that includes Anub and Jet. They were both there, and he won that event. So I know for a fact that he belongs, but he has been struggling. I think he's just trying to find his groove right now, but he did make it into third, so he does have a shot at the finals. So best of luck to him, and I'm definitely rooting for any guy that's in our or in my region. Jet, I already talked about him. He's the person that really needs to find his groove right now. He's one of the top pilots in the world. He has that crown, but he just hasn't been performing. Looks like he needs some yoga classes to really get him into that Zen state. Finally, we have Anub and Gab. I'm going to lump these two together because they are in a league of their own. They're just doing so well competing against each other. They're just on a different level. It's so fun watching these two race against each other right now. And they're also, they're competitive in different parts of the track, and they take advantage of each other's mistake. Pretty muchly right now, what decides the battle is who made the last mistake is who's going to win in a battle against Anub and Gab. I do think, though, that Gab has a slight advantage when it comes to strategy. He seems like a person that once he commits to a strategy, he'll stick with the strategy, and those strategies seems to be doing really well for him. He's not the type of person that will fly outside his bounds of risk in order to try to get a first place finish. He'll take the points and he'll move on, and he'll only push when he absolutely needs to. And if you follow any type of sport, that's a formula for winning. And I think he's really good at that type of strategy, and it's really proving out to be a winning formula for him right now. A-Nub, on the other hand, you can tell he's just such a well-rounded pilot. He's so good in almost every aspect. I do think Gab is pushing him, so he's actually reaching like new limits. Like every single time he races, he's breaking the track record. So you can tell that he's got more left in the tank. And right now, he could be just biding his time to make sure that he can irk out just a little bit more speed to beat out Gab to get that first place finish he's really looking for. So the takeaway from Group 1 is that Gab and A-Nub, they're the ones to watch. Nurk, he's the underdog, but don't ever count him out. That's what I've learned. It'll be really interesting to see how those three do against Group 2. So let's go ahead and move on to Group 2 and talk about them. This was definitely like the combat group. There was a lot of crashing, there was a lot of aggressive play, and there was also a lot of mistakes. And this is to be expected because the only veteran pilot that was in that group was Wild Willie. So Willie was the vet of the group, and it really showed because he came in first and he dominated most of the heats. So we all really know Willie. He does really well. He's a very well-rounded pilot. He enjoys taking his risks, but he usually comes out ahead when it comes to those risks. And he's one of the pilots that's just really fun to watch because he's always fast, and you never know when he's going to crash. One of the pilots that definitely competed against him was McStrawley. He was probably the most funnest pilot to watch competing against Wild Willie. The only issue with Mistral is that when he competed with Wild Willie, he more often than not crashed out, and that really cost him because he didn't make it into the top three. But you can tell that Mistral and Willie, I mean, they're both really aggressive pilots. They like taking risks. They want to be first place. It's just that Willie, just that, I guess, veteran atmosphere really, it won out because he got first, and McStrawley, he got fifth, and he was not able to make it into the finals. But I really enjoyed watching McStrawley race. You can just, yeah, you can tell that he really wanted it, and that aggressive flying nature is just really fun to watch, especially against a pilot like Wild Willie. The next person on the list is probably Jaws. Like I already said, 75K contract. You know, he's the luckiest rookie pilot in DRL right now. It really showed that, you know, he won the video game contest, but he's got the skills in the real world to compete against them. He made mistakes just like the rest of the rookies, but he got in. That's really the important thing. And finally, Atma 20 was the last rookie pilot to get in. Didn't really stand out to me, to be honest with you. All of the rookie pilots, they were all great. They were fun to watch just because of how aggressive they are and how often they crashed out. But unfortunately, you know, when there's that much crashing, when there's that much passing and trying to get, you know, ahead of each other, they don't really stand out. Wild Willie stand out because he was always ahead in first or second. McStrawley stand out because he was competing with Wild Willie at most of the heats, but he inevitably crashed out, which usually gave Wild Willie the win. I will say, though, that this second group probably was affected by the first group. I mean, if you watched the first group and you saw all those record-setting paces, it probably amped you up and you wanted to be just as aggressive because you knew you were going to compete against the top three pilots from that group. And I got to think that that contributed to a lot of crashing that occurred with the second group. You know, I have to think that if the second group had gone first, they would have been a little bit more relaxed. They would have been a little bit more conservative, and I think more of them would have finished the races. But you never know. That's how the dice rolls. You know, sometimes watching the other group race might not be a bad thing, or might not be a good thing. Sorry, might not be a good thing. But it's just one of those funny things that you can speculate on, but we'll never know. I think one of the interesting things to say is that as a spectator, when you watch Group 2, you think to yourself, oh, if one of them had just adopted a different strategy by the third heat or the fourth heat and just gone with a steady, slow and steady strategy, they would have easily gotten to the finals. But right now, I don't think any of the pilots are getting any situational reports because they don't have a spotter talking in the ear. In almost every other motorsport, I think you know that they're getting feedback either from the pits or with a spotter or something like that. Right now, I don't think DRL has something like that, so they're not really getting any situational awareness that their competitor crashed out. All they need to do is finish, and they'll earn the points needed to pass them. So it's one of the things where it'll be interesting to see if that gets adopted sometime soon in DRL, in which the pilots now have yet another thing to deal with, somebody talking their ears. Some pilots, they really don't like that. Some pilots probably really like that because it gives them that situational awareness so that they can make better decisions. A lot of times in racing, being the fastest on the track might not win you the race. So again, it's one of those things where as a spectator you can say that, and we'll just see how it plays out for the season. But that's all I have. I'm trying to keep these short. It was definitely fun watching this. If you haven't watched the episode, you definitely should. It's a fun time watching these races and all these pilots that you can easily know, and the community is so friendly. That's all I have, though. Over and out.